What is denied by many people but is actually 100% real? You don't know how to fight unless you've been trained or have experience in fighting. Most people imagine themselves only to have reality smash them in the nose. A lot of people even injure themselves just trying to throw punches. My kid swore they could fight off a knife attack. My husband got a marker and had our kid try to separately fight each of us off them. They failed horribly. But they now know it'd be near impossible to defend themselves in a knife fight. I would add that many people who practice certain martial arts also overestimate their abilities. If you don't actually fight in competition or at least serious sparring, then your training probably won't help as much as you think it will. Same thing is true for firearms training and even more difficult to account for. Another thing is some martial artists not being cognizant of the fact that real fights aren't fair. Your assailant might be armed or there might be multiple people. Jiu-jitsu is great against one unarmed guy, but your ground game will fail hard when the other guy's friend is standing and kicking you while you execute a textbook triangle choke. Or worse, even the best fighters are wise to avoid a street fight whenever possible. To use that famous quote, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Story 2. A lie detector isn't reliable. I'm stunned by the number of people who think it is. I see it so often in news stories about crimes. People in the comments section say, just make him take a polygraph, then we'll know for sure. To anyone hearing this, don't ever agree to take a polygraph examination if you're suspected of involvement in a crime. There's a good chance it will produce a false negative or positive, and even though the results are not admissible in court in many places, it may bias the police, the press, and your friends and family against you. If the police push you to submit to a polygraph examination, it's because they use it as an interrogation tool. You'd think polygraph results not being admissible in court would be a hint that they don't work, but no. I've met people who know and accept that they're not admissible, but are also convinced they're 100% accurate. So far, none of these people can explain why we bother with trials and evidence and burden of proof and reasonable doubt, etc., instead of just using lie detectors. If they worked, the justice system would be a hell of a lot faster. Eyewitness testimony is also extremely unreliable. It makes sense why DNA has exonerated so many people when the old tools used to investigate were also terrible. Story 3. Being 35 to 50 wasn't considered elderly back in the day. It was common for people to live into their 70s and 80s. The reason we get average lifespan data with such low numbers is because so many babies passed away, skewing the average values downward. This is half true. While people didn't drop like flies in their 30s, they definitely didn't commonly live until their 70s and 80s. Most people before mass industrialization and emergence of modern medicine passed in their 50s and 60s. Nobles, whose lives are documented the most, probably lived a while longer, but they made up a tiny minority of the population compared to the lower classes. When Social Security was first put into place, only about half of all men who made it to 21 lived long enough to collect Social Security, and they were expected to collect it for roughly 13 years after benefits began. In 1990, almost 3/4 of the men who lived to be 21 continued to live long enough to collect Social Security and would do so for an average of a little over 15 years. And that's just in the last century. Well after the advent of modern medicine, a period roughly beginning in the late 1700s, though that's also a bit of a misleading baseline, as the early 1900s were a bit of a low point. In medieval Europe, 1200 to 1750-ish, a man who survived to 21 would be expected to make it to about 62. And interestingly, monarchs would be expected to pass about 6 years earlier than lesser nobles. Looking at modern hunter-gatherers, foragers living without modern medicine or technology of any kind, finds lifespans that range from late 50s to mid-60s, with a bulk of the data pointing to somewhere in the middle. Archaeological data is all over the place, and is disputed and controversial at best. Most likely, we can say that, for the most part, we've increased the average lifespan at 21 by about 10 to 15 years since prehistoric times. But the big takeaway is that we've made those last years much better for most people. And people don't recognize just how much healthier older people have gotten, even in just the last 40 years. Look at Golden Girls. It's about old women in the golden years of their life, right? When that show went off the air, Rue McClanahan, Blanche, was the same age that Sarah Jessica Parker is now. And just like that, sure ain't about old women trying to find contentment as widows. Back in the day, 60-year-olds were old. Maybe not in the sense of being about to keel over any minute, but definitely in the sense of being weak, arthritic, and with the best years of their life behind them. Story 4. Shark attacks are extremely rare. And can we get a shout out for cougars too? They've eliminated 27 people since 1868. You could almost call them harmless with those numbers. I grew up in the mountains going on long hikes with my dogs. We often saw cougar tracks as well as deer and other wildlife, but despite our next-door neighbors regularly coming home to a cougar on the roof, we didn't see any. We would hear them at night. A while ago, I found out they chirp like crickets and my blood ran cold for a second. I used to hear chirps all the time on my walks. But yeah, even when I'd go on walks at midnight in the hot summer, I was never as nervous as I am about walking in the city alone now. I used to walk heavily to warn the rattlers and never had an incident with a single aggressive animal at all. I was always told that if a mountain lion wanted to hurt you, you would never know. They're nice to look at, though. I have a favorite quote from a park ranger. You may never see a mountain lion in the wild, but if you spend any significant time in the wild, they've seen you. Story 5. It's okay to eat MSG. People eat piles of it without even realizing it, but as soon as they enter a Chinese restaurant, it's no MSG for me, thanks. And then the next day they're gobbling down ranch dressing, aka liquid MSG, or seared meat, which is MSG, or mushrooms, which contain natural glutamates, or soy sauce, which again contains a ton of glutamates. I worked with someone who would go on about how she could never eat MSG because it triggered migraines. She was saying how sad it is that she can't eat Chinese food, just a little bit sets her off. She even brought this up as she was eating a salad with ranch. One time I had a group of people over for tacos and I had used a Goya seasoning pack with MSG. She ended up coming and I told her I'm sorry, there's MSG. She went ahead and ate it, even after seeing the label because it's not Chinese food, so it's probably okay. Oddly, her husband is Chinese American. I'm guessing she just doesn't like Chinese food and wants an excuse not to eat it. Or maybe she does get migraines, but something else triggers it. Story 6. In group preference. Implicit biases, despite countless studies providing evidence that it is human nature and inevitable, people still deny and refuse to acknowledge their own actions. Hate this. I have things I do in my mind to gauge any level of prejudice I may be unconsciously holding in a given situation. But if I mention this in a social group, especially one that counts itself as progressive, it just devolves into, wow, you're coming out and saying you're exist. You're trash. No, I'm gauging my own level of implicit bias internally to help me adjust my approach externally. I'm just putting that before my own ego. I hate the social need to deny having ever done anything wrong. I wish I could own my part in different issues without being deemed to be totally at fault or trash or whatever. While you did say you did X in the past, why is it that the level of maturity and self-awareness that knocks therapists' socks off is an everlasting admission of guilt and immorality to everyone else? I quit my job the other day and the manager and boss ended up asking me why and I started listing out all the reasons. Manager says you've never said any of this to me before. And I go, yes I have, and proceeded with a list of the times I did. She denied it a few times and kept defending the actions of the coworkers I had been talking about, and every time she did, I straight up used what she'd said, and ignored, or forgotten, back to her. She spent the whole rest of the time I was there meaning to mug me as I went on to her, and more importantly, her boss, all about the long list of recurring problems I've been dealing with for months that I brought up repeatedly and have been ignored by management. Cathartic AF. Things are getting better, but people are kinda crappy. Everything in a crappy system is going to be shaded by that overarching crappiness, but you don't have to look back too far in history to see some strange fruit and realize we've come a long way. And since you've come a long way from this video, why not hit the like button and subscribing to my channel for more stories? Story 7. That they're good humans because they have good thoughts. You have to do good to be a good person. The world is full of people complaining, but we're in need of people willing to sacrifice and not make it about themselves. We judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. Story 8. That financial success has largely to do with luck, where you were born, who your parents are, etc. I remember a popular post a few years back. It was a young woman who was giving everyone an inspirational story of how she got out of debt. Step 1 was her grandma let her stay in the property she had, rent-free. Bills were paid. Either grandma or her parents, and then she and her husband, yep, there were 2 of them, could then save money and get out of debt. She genuinely seemed to think this was an achievement, so anyone struggling out there, fear not. Just stay in one of your family homes for free with no bills and you too can be back on your feet. Story 9. The Sixth Extinction. There have been 5 known mass extinction events, the last one being when the dinosaurs died out. What most people don't know is that the extinction didn't happen instantly, or over a few days. It actually went slowly over a period of hundreds of thousands of years. These days, species are going extinct at a rate that is over 1,000 times faster than the previous event. So yes, the 6th mass extinction has only started. It has made good progress already and is starting to grow hairs down there, and yells at its parents before running into its room and slamming the door shut. Story 10. That having children is not for everyone. That it's not all sunshine and the meaning of life and millions of people regret being parents. I think everyone on both sides of this needs to accept that becoming a parent means absolutely committing yourself to the cause. You can't just give up when it gets too hard. Your kids are now your entire world. If you're not ready to commit to that, then you're not ready to be a parent. Too many of my relatives saw having multiple kids as a fun thing to do. They were wholly unprepared for the situation. And now their kids and those kids' grandparents, if present, have to deal with the consequences. It's also a lot harder to have kids now than it was 25 years ago when I was born. I owe my entire life to the benefit system that supported my single mother and her 4 children, which was slowly dismantled as I became older to the point that my mother started leeching from her kids because she could no longer support herself. Now I'm earning more than she ever has, but I can't even afford to rent a flat. Story 11. That most people would do some pretty awful things for money if presented the opportunity. People would like to believe that they have strong morals, but if presented with a button that would end 10 random people in the world in exchange for $1 million, many would press it. I would guess at least half of the population would, and many would press it multiple times. But not many people would actually admit that they would press it if given the opportunity to. Maybe I'm just too cynical and not many would press it, but this hypothetical situation is something I think about a lot. When I divorced my husband, he was in utter shock. His father was wealthy. Most of the crappy things he did to me was at his father's suggestion. Money messes with people. He was his father's lapdog. As much as he wanted his freedom and his own life, he was a slave to his father's purse strings. Money his father had stolen through a Ponzi scheme. It was blood money in my mind. His father used him and he couldn't even see it because acknowledging it would ruin the father or son bond he lined up for so badly. I couldn't stand to watch it. I couldn't stand and refuse to live my life under his father's thumb and watch my marriage disintegrate all for the promise of that money. It was corrosive. My ex literally couldn't understand how I could walk away, and also hated me for being able to do so easily. Story 12. MLMs are a freaking scam. I've mentioned this before, but I'll always take an opportunity to share it because it's absolutely disgusting. There's a girl who I met once in my life who started messaging me every year on my birthday with variations of the same script. She's on Optavia. Don't know much about it. It will send me something along the lines of, "Hey girl, happy birthday. I wish you nothing but health in the coming year. I can actually help you with this. Healthy meal plans that can assist with weight loss and get you back in shape. If you're ready to take the plunge and get healthy and down the pounds with me, let me know." And here's the sickening part. She sent this to me the year I celebrated my 30th birthday in the hospital. I'd been in there a month on an actual feeding tube that was failing and doctors were scrambling to figure out a way to get me fed or get nutrition. I eventually had to rely on what is called TPN, which feeds you through your heart, and needed a full stomach replacement. I'd lost 40 pounds as a result of all this. Updates about my condition were constantly being shared on social media by my husband when I was completely incapacitated, so if she took 3 seconds to look, she would have known. So yeah, I've had a lot of crappy MLM experiences, but that was just beyond gross. I think 80 to 90% understand this completely, and MLMs prey on the rest. Story 13. High fructose corn syrup is worse than real sugar, so you can find the specifics yourself, but the rough explanation is how it metabolizes. When you eat regular sugar, sucrose, your body knows what to do with it. Note that you can still overconsume sugar, but when you consume high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, your body knows less of what to do with it, so it throws our whole balance off. High fructose corn syrup, HFCS, and regular table sugar, sucrose, both consist of two simple sugars, glucose and fructose. However, the proportions of glucose and fructose differ between HFCS and sucrose. In HFCS, the most common type used in foods is HFCS 5,5, which contains approximately 55% fructose and 45% glucose. On the other hand, table sugar, sucrose, is a disaccharide composed of 50% fructose and 50% glucose molecules. The difference in proportions of glucose and fructose can affect how the body processes and utilizes these sugars. It's essential to note that while HFCS has been associated with various health concerns, it is not the sole contributor to these issues. Other factors like overall diet, lifestyle, and individual health conditions play significant roles in the development of health problems. As with any dietary component, moderation is key. Reducing overall added sugar intake, including HFCS and sucrose, can help promote better health outcomes. Opting for whole and processed foods and drinks without added sugars can be a beneficial step towards maintaining a balanced diet and a healthier lifestyle. Story 14. That a body detox is like 100% BS. Yeah, you can reword the phrase and say something similar that may be similar, like being aware of what you're intaking and it may make yourself feel better because it might just be the fact that the food you're eating may be bad for you and so the new food you're eating takes less energy to digest. Don't quote me, I am not a medical professional. The phrase itself, detox, is usually used when you want to clear your system of impurities and harmful substances. Do you know what your body detoxes? Because you have a liver and kidneys. The body does it for you. And the whole new thing of alkaline water is complete BS. Because stomach acid has a pH of, I think, 1 or 2. You drinking alkaline water does not do crap. Because if you eat a tomato, it doesn't change it. If you have something that is naturally alkaline, it doesn't do anything because of the stomach acid being so acidic. If you really think about it, the blood's pH is 7.35 to 7.45, and if it even slightly goes out of that range, it is detrimental to the body and you will become very ill. So if you listen to all these people on social media, just know it's complete BS. It would be like saying put a hole in the mask so you can breathe better. It doesn't do anything better for your body because the reason for the mask is to not make you sick. The mask is the kidneys and liver and the hole is the alkaline water. Basically, it does nothing. Story 15. Everyone has psychopathic or narcissistic traits. Not talking about Bundy level. If you think about it, jobs, friendships, school, or even out in public, we tell people what they want to hear. Sometimes we have to be nice to people regardless of situations. We use our friends all the time, whether it's money or simply just having someone by your side. It's not the benefits for them, but it's for you. I was thinking about this recently, and I think a real friend is someone who you choose to be around because you like listening to them. You have a curiosity for the way they are, just them as themselves. You appreciate them. You just simply rather pass your time with them, even if it's in complete silence. Every moment is satisfying no matter what. Every moment is always enough. It's always perfect. It's always exactly what you asked for by being around that person, because you just appreciate that they exist. The silence around them is deeply satisfying. It's peaceful, and it's comfortable. You know, the silence is because nothing has to be said. It's blissful to find someone really genuine and authentic, and just sit in silence doing your own thing while they do theirs. It's truly a different type of normal that I don't think most people get to feel in their life. It's hard to find a really normal person. It's such a simple and comfortable experience to find someone authentic. It's so simple. Nothing ever has to go unsaid. Nothing said is ever bad or wrong or scary. I think narcissistic people hang out with others because they want attention or validation. They like to say the right thing rather than what they truly think or feel. They don't do it to listen and appreciate another person. They do it because they're desperately trying to satisfy their own limitless void of, I'm afraid I'm not enough for myself. They rather not be accepted for who they are and accept others as they are. Maybe they don't believe that is even possible. It's a game of who's worse, and every moment is lacking. Every moment is not enough to fill their insecurity and delicate fleeting self-worth. They're uncomfortable to be around because you can just sense that they want something, yet you can never tell what. It feels like any silence is just waiting for noise. Silence with them is anxiety-inducing, because you know there's so much they aren't saying, or that they're holding back out of fear or something, or that they're waiting for you to say or do something. It's a game. It's not real. You can't say anything you want. You can't be yourself around them for long. Eventually, you start hiding yourself, because you want to avoid making things more uncomfortable. It feels like they hide so much, like they're just a set of defense mechanisms and impulse reactions, instead of an actual person with depth. Interactions feel shallow. It's just weird. It feels different, but you can never place your finger on it. It almost feels like a slow suffocation of your identity. Like nothing you say or do is right to them, even though it shouldn't have to be because you are you and that's all anyone should ever expect of you. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy what's something obvious you just realized. Story 4 will surprise you. See you in that video.